I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
So non-ejaculatory practice actually, because it sort of takes that away, just like if you're in a Zen monastery and like there's all you're doing is sitting and doing nothing for 12 hours a day, kind of like everything is taken away, you know, you actually get, you're almost forced to realize what is.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for listening. Today's episode is part 2 of an interview with Alicia and Erwan, two very well-known personal development leaders who are also a couple and who are probably most well-known for a program that they developed called the Pleasure Course. This is a course in which they teach extended orgasm and relationship issues. If you haven't heard part 1 of the show, you should probably go back and do that because it'll give you more context for what we're talking about today. To recap, in part 1, Alicia and Erwan shared with us how they met and how they came together, and a bit about their initial conflicts, and about Erwan's initial awakening experience. Today, we're going to cover the topics of extended orgasm, non-ejaculatory sex, and how both of these contribute to the deepening of awareness. So with that, let's go to part 2 of our interview with Alicia and Erwan.
You know, how do you reach higher peaks of attraction, higher peaks of sexual turn-on?
Which are possible.
Which are possible, right. And it's a combination of the devotion to it, the practice, you know, learning some things, you know, where is the clitoris? How do you stroke the clitoris? What is extended orgasm? You know, I'll give you the bottom line, just to, give you the bottom line. You know, if the body is completely relaxed and the genitals are sensitized enough, which is rare, by the way, then the body will hit a level of sensation where it'll go into involuntary contractions in the genitals. But most people hit that place so their body is so tense, their pelvis is so tense when they do it, that they crash over the edge very quickly.
That's a quick orgasm.
That's a quick orgasm. If you get to that level of orgasm, you can picture maybe Masters and Johnson's graph. You know, you get excited, you kind of plateau for a while, and then you tense up, you go over an edge, and you crash down.
Yeah.
That's what their graph looks like.
Yeah.
But if you hit that orgasm line, that level of sensitivity in the genitals, and your body is extremely relaxed, especially the genital region, even pushed out, the opposite of tight ass, kind of pushed out like you're having a baby or something. You know, Alicia's having a baby, in a couple of months, so everything is now.
You're thinking of baby analogies.
Baby, everything, baby. We have all the equipment in the other room, the carriage and this and that. But if you hit that line and the body is extremely relaxed, then the body can sustain extended orgasm. Then there's some technique involved, but the biggest issue in learning that is the psychological issues. You have to be very, that's going to trigger being that relaxed and letting go that much, especially in the body and all of that. I mean, that's, there's a lot of material to work through.
Yeah, there's a lot to work through before you can get to that. Okay, but that's very specific in terms of a specific practice that you guys do. I'm curious to step it out a moment and think in terms of when there's a conflict at work and you come home. Well, let me ask another specific question. Is the extended orgasm in the morning your only sexual practice?
It's the only regular sexual practice. We have intercourse once or twice a week, and we have oral sex maybe 5 times a week. So there's one of the nice...
And are those ejaculatory for you?
No, rarely.
But they're orgasmic for you?
Right.
But the extended orgasm in the morning is not orgasmic for you, it's just for Alicia.
No, it is orgasmic for me, but it's not genitally orgasmic for me. I'm doing her. So orgasm is involuntary contractions in the genitals, but the largest part of orgasm, like Masters and Johnson's distinguish 12 signs, involuntary contractions in the genitals and engorgement and all the rest of this stuff. But the 13th and maybe most important sign, you can't measure it, and it's one reason that they didn't include it, because you can't actually measure this, but is release. So I'm doing her, my finger's on her clitoris. She's having involuntary contractions in her genitals, but we're together in the experience. You can't produce extended orgasm in somebody else's body that's really orgasm unless you're in the experience together. See, orgasm by definition is a state of release. It's a state of body and mind release. So I would add that 13th.
So if that's true, then you wouldn't be able to achieve extended orgasm from a machine.
Well, somebody can, I mean, that's an interesting question. No, I mean, maybe I should amend what I said. Somebody can produce extended orgasm in their own body, right? So they could do it with a machine, or they could do it with their finger or something like that. But to produce some extended orgasm in somebody else's body, you have to be totally there with them, because you're taking them on a ride.
Really? You couldn't just be a machine and be told what to do?
But then you wouldn't be producing the extended orgasm in their body. They would be producing it in their own body. You wouldn't be doing them. The machine's not really. The machine is stimulating something.
That I get. Okay, so if you're the one being if you're the doer.
Right.
There's probably a much more scientific way to say that. If
you're that's what we call it first. We call them the doer.
Right. Okay, so this is a scientific
Yeah.
term for it.
Yeah.
All right, if you're the doer, yeah, you have to be right there with them.
Right.
So this isn't just a practice of sexuality. This is a practice of intimacy and being.
Right.
Exactly.
And union.
That's what it is. And that's the part that's the most important part.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Okay. So that's that. And then you were saying you also have oral sex
Right.
and intercourse.
Right.
And you happen to practice non-ejaculatory orgasms.
Right.
Is that related to this, or is that just a separate?
Well, I'm 45 years old. As I've gotten older, I've realized to keep up my chi, my vital energy, my sexual energy, that kind of thing, it's just advantageous to ejaculate minimally. It also, people, maybe guys in particular, but certainly people, can be very sort of goal-oriented, whether it's, the sex act turns out if the guy ejaculates, or life turns out when we, get this job or that thing or whatever. And when the goal is removed, it really forces us into a position of, am I enjoying myself now? Am I present now? Is it, it kind of forces us right into now, forces us right into that hole you were talking about, that sense of emptiness and deprivation, and oh my God, the goodie, the cookie, the goal's not there, or not going to be there, or something like that. If we feel into that emptiness, what we find is that the only reason it occurs as empty is because of the ego obscurations of true nature. Then we feel through all of that, the emptiness turns into space. The space turns into what's actually in the space, which is being, consciousness, God, whatever word we want to use. And so non-ejaculatory practice actually, because it takes away a goal that happens to be devitalizing to, I'm not against it, I ejaculate sometimes, but because it sort of takes that away, just like if you're in a Zen monastery and all you're doing is sitting and doing nothing for 12 hours a day, kind of like everything is taken away, you actually you're almost forced to realize what is. And then you happen to be having sex, and it's very, in this case, and it's very enjoyable, and it makes all sex acts much better.
I've never heard an explanation of non-ejaculatory orgasm practice that insightfully stated. It's always about a goal.
Right.
The non-ejaculatory orgasms are always about a goal of sexual power, or being able to please a woman more than she's ever been pleased before. Taking away the goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a lovely interpretation. It's the first time I've ever been attracted to the idea.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. Really, it's just nicer to be. The goal, the miracle. This is it. Life. This moment. Here we are having this interview. You know what I'm saying? This is awesome. Even if you're in terrible, difficult circumstances, pain, whatever, life is the goal. That's the realization. It's not some state of mind. It's not some um, thing in the bank. This is it.
And Alicia, is this all present for you as well?
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, I remember when Erwan and I first started having extended orgasm dates, and I loved sex before that. Just loved sex. I loved orgasms. I was into it. And the first time that we had an extended orgasm date, I remember I went over to Erwan's house. It was after the 4 months of me saying no, 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 and then calling him and no, 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 and then I'm being silly, and I went to his house. We had an extended orgasm date. I was going to try this thing. And we were in his room, and he had this red, I just remember, it was like red bulb in his lamp. So there's this cool glow on the room, and I was laying on my back, and he was sitting up at my side, and he was stroking my clitoris, and there was nowhere to go. I could feel that Erwan was feeling every single stroke and wasn't trying to get me off or get me to have an orgasm or something, move it anywhere. And there was such a peace in that and so much pleasure. I mean, I was feeling so much sensation. It was incredible. And afterwards, I was so high and had this expanded experience in my entire body and my mind. And it was the most pleasurable thing I had ever experienced, and not needing to get anywhere.
I love this idea of not needing to get anywhere, and Erwan was stroking your clitoris with no agenda, in essence. But let me test that around the edges, because it does seem like there was an agenda, despite what you both just shared so eloquently about it. The agenda is an extended orgasm, right?
If as human things operate at multiple levels, at the level of manifest existence, we're always doing something. Right now we're having an interview and creating a podcast, and then later on we're going to, cook dinner, and the goal is to have dinner and that kind of stuff. So, that's kind of how life works. We're not like against goals, but at a deeper level, we're alive. We're here. We're talking. We're not going anyplace.
Yeah.
So it's not that there's not, things that we do. It's not, we're not like, never plan anything, and it's fine to say, yeah, hey, great, here's this extended orgasm, we like to practice this, like that. So, you kind of have to have multiple levels of awareness about it, but most importantly, realize what's the deeper level of awareness about it. It's much more important to enjoy cooking and preparing the food, than it is to end up with a good result. And people make that mistake often of focusing on the result.
And certainly with sex.
Right? Because we're always, if you enjoy cooking, you probably come up with a better result anyway. Because then you're conscious and you're present while you're doing it. If you get focused on the result, well then, okay, maybe you get a good result, but then when it's time to enjoy that result, you can't enjoy what you're doing at that point, which is eating. So then it's all about like being done with the meal or not eating too much or, whatever. And it's this like endless, it's like chasing this carrot endlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And Alicia, I wanted to ask another question of you too, which was your awareness of awareness. Everyone's talking a lot about that concept. And was that foreign to you when you two first met? And did it suddenly become alive for you?
It was not foreign when we first met. I think in college was when I first started to discover that there was more than meets the eye, you could say. There was more than achieving things and having friends and getting a boyfriend and being happy. And when I was in college, I went to UC Santa Barbara, and I went through a lot during that period of time. Like, I got depressed. I wasn't making friends very easily. I got into therapy. I was starting to learn about myself. And I had the amazing fortune to meet a woman there who led these kind of female spirituality workshops, which was the oddest thing to all of the people I lived with. I don't know if you know anything about UC Santa Barbara, but it's a party town, and you live in Isla Vista, and everybody's partying and kegs and punk bands and all kinds of stuff.
And the Greek system.
Yes, which I wasn't a part of that, but it was very party-ish, at least the circle that I was running around in. So I was kind of had this separate life where I was really discovering who I really was and what was really happening on a deeper level in life. And that's when I first, you could say rediscovered it, because I feel like we're all really aware of who we are ultimately and then forget. So that was where that started for me. And then as I went on in years, I stayed kind of attracted to things and searching for things that reminded me of awareness and who I was. And then when I met Erwan, that was very much the experience that I had. I remember the first day when I went over to his house, the same day as our first extended orgasm date, and I was sitting in his living room, where he did all of his teaching, where I had been that one time a bunch of years ago, and I just felt like crying when I sat there. I just sat on the couch, and I was like, I feel like crying. I just feel so alive, so here, so something is here. I could feel it.
And did that awareness deepen through the extended orgasm practice?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I've been poking around the edges of this conflict question. I want to come at it from yet another angle. When a conflict arises for the two of you, and it's a painful one, and the two of you are very positional, that must happen.
Oh, it never happens.
Happens all the time.
Yes, it happens.
Okay. How capable are you of maintaining awareness of your true nature in the midst of that?
Well, based on the question, like when it gets to that point, at that moment in time, very little.
Yeah.
If you're worked up to a degree that you're acting out,
Yeah.
By definition, acting out is some unresolved issue that one is not conscious of playing out, and one is on a type of autopilot.
Yeah.
So by definition, when we're in that state, it's not a very conscious state.
Yeah. And then what?
Well, then we have a fight.
And then we have it out. We're both very fiery in our own ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what's nice is that they tend to be short-lived, because, something can get hold of any of us, our inner psychic structures and so on. But, if we have a practice and we have a life devoted to something, and, our marriage is inside of a larger commitment to being and as being and so on and all the rest of this, and we've got all kinds of structures that support us and, hopefully a certain level of development, the sanity or the objectivity that comes with consciousness, or the clarity that comes with consciousness, or the love that comes with consciousness, or compassion or affinity and so on, that restores us relatively quickly. And it's not really something that we do. It's more like something that does us. It's like we're here as individuals and all the rest of that, but it's a larger, the deeper underlying dimensions of life that underlie all of life, however conscious or unconscious we are. The more conscious we are, the more they carry us. So we definitely have big ugly fights, but they tend to be shorter.
You're saying that when you're reacting, you're by definition unconscious to some degree.
Yeah.
Because you're acting out an unconscious mechanism.
Right.
And that's what we mean when we say that someone's triggered.
Yeah.
And then you said that we get over it more quickly because of the structures that we have in place and the context that we have in place for our marriage. And then you said that it's not as if we do something, it's more like the something does us.
Yeah.
What do you mean by the something does us?
Consciousness, but not consciousness so much as an individual consciousness, but consciousness as a fundamental ground of reality. As the ego starts to sort of dissolve away, people sort of are afraid they're going to die or lose themselves or not be an individual or whatever. But the reality is that as that starts to fall away, what we are fundamentally, really what everything is, fundamentally starts to become more apparent, starts to become more obvious. Even if we don't realize that, we still are that. But it becomes more obvious. And as it becomes more obvious that what's actually the case, what we're actually made up of, then that starts to, where one is more willing to kind of let go into that and sort of be steered than try to control one's life. And it works out much better.
Which is very, very different from your identity, your ego identity, the one that's having the fight, not wanting to feel bad anymore.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore doing a thing
right.
to not feel bad.
Right.
Which is really, maybe it stops the fight, but you're suggesting that really it's just more of the same.
It's just more of the same. You've dealt with a symptom, but you haven't dealt with the disease in that case.
Because even if something gets resolved, I'm just kind of left with that feeling. It's like a fight hangover or something like that,
Yes.
rather than really letting go of being right or really letting go of, making it up to feel better. It's like just being fully released into now, and then things resolve.
It's a surrender.
It's a surrender,
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Right, and it's an open-eyed surrender. It's a surrender that follows realization. It's surrender that follows like, oh, we are this. Here we are talking. We are connected. We are the same consciousness. How else would we be talking? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like everything is in communication with everything actually. Certainly conscious beings. So it's not a blind surrender. It's a surrender to something that a person has really realized and seen for themselves. So both of those components are necessary.
From that place, so you also said something earlier about allowing. Both of you touched on that. I don't know if you used that word, but it was something about allowing our experiences to occur.
That's what's key. What's key is to open up to what we're experiencing in the moment fully.
Including the pain and the anger of unconsciousness. Especially
the anger and the pain of unconsciousness, because that's what we tend to withdraw from. It's almost a biological mechanism. It works. If fire is hot and kind of not good for the body, so if you put your hand in a flame, like there's an instinct to remove it. So that instinct of moving away from what's uncomfortable is very important for survival, especially at a biological level. But it also has us form a shell that we call the personality, right? Identity. Most people, it doesn't occur like a shell, it just occurs like that's who they are. But it's actually a hardening. The same way an alligator has a hard exoskeleton, human beings have a certain version of that themselves. And it's to survive things and protect us from not so much wild animals, but protect us in more emotional, psychological interaction with each other and things. It's sort of like a psychic shell. But that really dulls a person out, and it has them live in a type of solitary confinement behind that shell, not even seeing that they're in that shell. Right. So
thinking that shell is them.
Right. Thinking that shell is them. The escape route from that shell is not to fight against it. It's to feel it. Ooh, this feels really isolating. And like, oh boy, I'm getting triggered. Like somebody looks at me the wrong way when they offer me my coffee at Starbucks, and like, I'm pissed off. One starts to realize that, okay, I'm getting triggered everywhere. I'm like constantly being triggered. What is this? Oh, it doesn't have anything to do with the person serving me the coffee. It doesn't even have anything to do with my relationship partner or my job or my body or any of that kind of stuff. It has to do with this shell, this own personal private movie that we're all watching, that's basically our childhood over and over again, superimposed onto reality. And then one stops fighting with the circumstances and one starts dealing with oneself, one's false self, really. But, one starts experiencing that instead of numbing oneself to that and projecting it and going away from it. It's very important to experience it, realize it's not about the triggers, that is the ego holding that pain, resisting life, fighting to survive, and probably was useful in childhood. For me, it certainly was. I grew up in a very rough circumstance in New York City. Parents were, had a lot of difficulties of their own and so on, and, a lot of tragedy and death and, all kinds of stuff. And it was very useful to have a certain shell to deal with people and the school system and all of that. But after a while, it was not good for my relationship with Alicia.
So there's this concept that you hear sometimes referred to as the Gateless Gate.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess you could say in the context of what you were just talking about, that when you're inside the shell, believing the shell is who you are, you're on one side of the Gateless Gate. Mm-hmm. And then there's another moment when suddenly it occurs that it's just suddenly clear that the shell is not who we are, and that there's something much greater. Who we are is made up of something else, consciousness or God mind or something. And then suddenly you're on the other side of the Gateless Gate. And the reason it's called a Gateless Gate is when you're on that side, there is no gate, and there never was. Mm-hmm. And when you're inside the shell, there's this huge, gigantic gate that you have no access to opening. So it sounds to me like for the description of what you're describing here is perspective from the other side, the side where there is no gate. Do you find yourself flip-flopping back and forth?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, in this interview alone, probably 30 times.
And when you're on the side where the gate is present, do you find yourself terrified that the gate will never open back up for you?
Not so much anymore, because I'm talking a lot. You go ahead.
One thing I wanted to say specifically as it relates to us, if we're having a conflict or an argument or something, there's definitely lots of moments where it feels like, oh my gosh, he's this way and I'm this way and we're stuck in this and it's never going to go away. The gate is there. It's like you can't pass it. Yeah. And one thing that luckily now we are good at is taking space. That's the thing that allows, I know for me, I think for you, it allows me to then remember that the gate is not, I can pass the gate. And in taking space, I already know that I can pass the gate. It means going to different places, whether if we're in the house, just go to different parts of the house, like that, just giving each other. I always have this image of, this happens with the cats sometimes. They get riled up or something, and then they just need to like ruffle their feathers or something and kind of process the emotions physically or something. And I always think of just going to our corners and, just, and then clarity is there, and we know that, okay, that we have these issues, but we are not these issues. We're not those identities. Yeah. And it's easier to then come back together at some point and just be like, let's just drop this, or you were right, or, this or something.
I'm imagining that there are listeners of the show right now who understand completely what you're talking about, and listeners who are just shaking their heads, wondering, what are they talking about? And I'm curious what you would say to somebody for whom this isn't a second nature kind of conversation, who's never maybe addressed these sorts of topics. What would be an opening practice for somebody who was curious, wanted to be more self-aware in the ways that you're talking about, but has never practiced anything like this before?
An exercise we teach people in the pleasure course that I find particularly useful for people to kind of get what we're talking about, we call it the trigger exercise. Mm-hmm. You've been using this word, throughout the interview. So what we have people do is we have them write down places that they're triggered in their life currently. Then we go through a brief life history, and we have them notice that the feeling of that upset, their friend said something to them, or they didn't get the raise at work and they're upset about it, that's an old feeling. And it goes back a long time. And then what happens there is that people start to see that the contraction, the difficulty, the suffering is actually not sourced in the circumstance. It's sourced in their psychology. And when people get that, it's a big opening. It's a big relief, because then it's like you kind of get to stop like endlessly trying to get your circumstances in some way that, circumstances are never perfect.
And we have a lot of control over our psychology,
Right.
At least in that narrow sense, but not necessarily over our circumstances.
Right. You can really do something about your psychology if you really want to. It's a massive piece of work. I don't want to underestimate that.
Right.
But you can do something about that. That is a place where willingness and devotion and clarity and interest and being open to one's experience, your intention there will make a lot of difference. You could have the intention of making $1 billion, but or being a famous movie actor, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's good you mentioned the trigger exercise from the pleasure course, because I was going to say something similar, which is looking at what you're upset about and looking at taking it away from the other person or the circumstance or the thing that you think is upsetting you, and looking at, okay, what's arising in yourself.
Yeah.
That simple practice would be the first thing to do.
Well, thanks for being on the show, you guys. It's been such a pleasure having you here. Now, I like to end I'd like to end shows with a quick game of this or that. Do you know how to play this or that?
No.
It's like Would You Rather.
Mm-hmm.
It's very simple. I'm going to say this or that.
Right.
And you're going to say which one you
We get to
choose.
pick.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. I got it.
Okay. Well, chocolate or peanut butter?
Peanut butter.
Chocolate.
Does that ever rise? You mix the two, right, for the two of you?
Sometimes,
Yes.
yeah. I'm trying to eat less sugar.
I've been eating a lot of chocolate and peanut butter the last couple weeks.
As I've lowered my sugar intake, the appeal of sugar has decreased, and I've been eating a lot of pumpkin seed butter and almond butter and.
Oh, that's a great. How long did it take for the appeal for sugar to start to decrease? That is probably the most important thing in the entire episode.
Right. Now I should. Tell you I've done this multiple times, so the sugar craving has, not craving, but the tendency towards sugar has come back. But it generally takes me about a week to 2 weeks before things stop that are sweet start to occur as really sweet.
Oh, you're a quick one on all sorts of things. You're a lucky man.
Thank you.
All right, next question. Batman or Superman?
Batman.
Oh, I know very little about both of those superheroes.
But you know something.
I know. I mean, I'm drawn to Batman more than Superman.
Because
it's just kind of darker or something.
Yeah, depth.
Yeah.
Okay. Enlightenment or $1 billion?
Oh, definitely enlightenment.
Enlightenment.
That's easy.
Okay. And if you had to live for ever, as in infinity, or die in the next 5 minutes, which would it be?
Well, I honestly, I think that's sort of both are true. If I had to pick one, the one that feels more real to me, that I'm more drawn to, is infinity.
Yeah. I live forever.
I think you will anyway.
Yeah, in some form or other. Maybe not in this form.
Yeah.
But in some form or other.
Well, that's it for our interview with Alicia and Erwan, folks. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about these two, you can find their website at www.erwandavon.com. That's ERWANDAVON.com. And I'll put that link in our show notes. If you like what you heard on the show, please subscribe to us on iTunes. It makes a big difference when you do that and when you leave us a review. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out to us via one of our social platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both @together_show, or you can just email me at host@together.guide. Our producer is Charlene Goto. Our web designer is Courtney Munna. Our art director, and my one and only, is Aubrey Pick. She's the whole reason, folks. Thanks once again to my guests, Alicia and Erwan. Guys, let's have a barbecue. Why not? That's all for today, folks. See you next time.